Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Categorically Romance podcast. My name is Bree, and today's episode is a dream come true. If you are new here, if you're not, it is no secret. I love Harlequin's romance line, aka True Love, aka Forever, depending on where you are in the world. And today I have four authors here joining me to talk about a series that we have in the series. So we're joined by Allie Blake. We have Rachel Stewart, we have Candy Shepard, and Michelle Douglas. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today.
Yay! Thank you for having us.
I figured we could just kind of go in book order. So starting with Allie. Allie, can you share with us how 2024 has been for you so far?
It's been good. It's crazy to think how far in we are. I think that's when you say how far, how's it going so far? It's actually been a great year. It's the 50th anniversary of Mills and Boon in Australia this year. So we've had so many exciting opportunities to do sort of radio talks about it. I've been doing library talks about the anniversary, and there's lots of fun stuff coming up at the Romance Writers of Australia conference later in the year as well. So when it comes to sort of romance and Harlequin and Mills and Boon, it's actually been a real banner year so far.
Yeah, keeping up with your stories and seeing all the cool things you do. It's just been so fun to kind of be able to follow along. So thank you for all of the fun things you're doing on that side of the world.
Yay, more to come, more to come.
Rachel, how's it been?
It's crazy busy. I don't know, it's just taken off. It's just wild. I think personally, I have been a poorly bean, so I have not been around. I've been quite quiet, head down, getting on with stuff. But I'm hoping to turn a corner and things will be perking up towards the end of the year. I've got lots of exciting news on the horizon. I'm hoping to be able to reveal more in the next couple of weeks. So I've got some big announcements coming out. So that's quite exciting. And yeah, I feel like my feet aren't quite touching the ground at all. So yeah, it's utterly fabulous. So hopefully I'll be around a lot more, I think, on social media towards the back end of the year, fingers crossed. So you should be hearing more from me, I hope.
Well, when you all kind of disappear, I figure there's something happening. There's some writing happening, some negotiations happening. We just have to be patient and wait for the surprise. So we'll be waiting for the reveal. Candy, what about you?
I also finished a book and have been working on a few other things that are writing, but they're not really book writing, if I can be mysterious.
Okay.
Of course, a big highlight was actually the release of these books. We had, the three other wonderful books by our three amazing authors. It was such a big thing for us and just such a dream come true to see our books out there and getting such a good reception from readers. That's been really exciting.
And Michelle?
I feel like it's still in February. It's like, how did we get to May? And I had these great plans to, I'm really going to build my newsletter this year and I'm really going to be a presence on social media. And I think that lasted 3 days. And then it was like, life got so busy. And I mean, the year's not over yet, so there is time to get my New Year's resolutions back in line. But it's like, I just decided to write a book because, well, no, I had a deadline, so let's write a book. And then it's like, oh, I've got another idea for a book. Well, let's just play with that for a little bit. And it's like so much fun. So it's been fabulous, but maybe I've not been ticking off my to-do list in the fashion I originally intended.
Can I throw a question in there that isn't on the list?
Absolutely.
I mean, y'all will be pros at this, but
Bring it.
I'm always and y'all, it's with the exception of Candy because it's her first time on the podcast. I feel like y'all, Allie, Rachel, Michelle, you've answered this before, but my hope is always like maybe someone new is listening to the podcast. So Romance, True Love, Forever. If they've never read it, how would you all describe it? Allie, how would you describe it?
Oh, it's a funny one. I think it's, of all of the lines through Harlequin, it's probably the broadest. So I think there's something for everyone in the line, because when it comes to kind of the spiciness of the line, there's a big range. When it comes to the settings of the line, you can have books that are set in the outback or set, in a fairy tale castle. You've got all kinds of stories through Harlequin Romance. So the Harlequin Romance line was the original. So when when Mills and Boon first existed, when they first started bringing romances out, that was kind of the only line until sort of a few decades ago it started splitting into different kinds of books. So I think it's always kept that sort of warm, sort of wistful, beautiful stories, beautiful romances, but you can get so many different kinds of stories, which is one of the beautiful things about writing this series with these guys is we all write for the same line, but we all have really different voices. And so it was fantastic to try to find a way to meld all of those different voices and levels of kind of humor and drama in our stories. But it's doable because in the Harlequin Romance, that Forever True Love line, really the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, these books feel very romance. Like they're very
Yes.
romance. I couldn't imagine them being anywhere else for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I think I would like to think that you can see yourself in these stories, though. I do think that you can. I would like to think that you can see, yourself in the heroine, that you can identify yourself in these stories. So I do kind of feel
Absolutely.
like there is a touch of, realism in them. That's what I like about the romance line.
When I started writing for this line 10 years ago, it was very much the bedroom door closed, and that differentiated it. But then over the years, the bedroom door has inched open. And that, as Ali was saying, allows for a variety of spice levels and whatever readers want. But the thing with it is, I think all the stories are deeply emotional. And I mean, that's why they're called true love, forever love. Deeply emotional at different levels of spiciness. And as Rachel was saying, really people that you can identify with a lot. And glamorous international settings are also part of it. So, as Ali said, it's hard to kind of define it because there's such a range in there, but they're all emotional and they're all about really beautiful love stories.
Yeah, I love how you said that. It feels like when I read them, it's the girl gets the fairy tale. The girl can get the fairy tale. And I identify with that. Like, we all want that. We all want that. So,
Mm.
what about you, Michelle?
I think it's the line that straddles the fantasy fairy tale element with realism, and I think that's what the line does really well. So we as readers can absolutely identify with the heroines of these stories, while the heroes are just total fantasy material. So it's just everything that is, floats my boat is in this line.
Well, we're talking about you all's series, 1 Year to Wed, or for our Australian friends, Wed in the Outback. Shout out to Sarah Loves Mills and Boon. We love her here. So, can each of you share, okay, where you are in the world? And let's talk how many True Love Forever titles your book in this series, like what that makes for you. Allie, what about you?
So this is actually my 20th anniversary of writing for Harlequin Mills and Boon. So my first book came out 20 years ago. And my story, which is the first story in the series, is called Secretly Married to a Prince. Spoiler alert, in most of the world, or Outback Princess in Australia. And it's my 47th book overall, but for Harlequin, it would be probably in the late 30s for the number of books that I've written for them, which blows my mind even saying it out loud.
Well, happy anniversary.
Thank
I've
you.
I've been able to read a lot at school because I've been giving my students are actually in a book club not unit,
Yes.
and I use what I'm reading to help them understand like plot and all of that. And they're like, "Miss, what's the name of the book you're reading?" And I'm like, "Secretly Married to a Prince." And they're like, "What are you?" But I actually do have a romance. I have a hardcore romance reader in one of my classes, and she's like,
Oh,
"Can you bring it?" And I'm like, as long as I have it back by the end of the year. So
love
I'm
it.
so excited. Rachel, what about you?
So this one is I'm in Yorkshire in the UK. So I'm the only Brit amongst us. So this will be my 21st. Yeah, number 21 for Mills and Boon, and that'll be I think 26 in total. But it's my 11th for True Love, and it's
Yes.
Reluctant Bride's Baby Bombshell. or Outback Brides for you, Michelle?
Brie, I'm in Sydney, Australia, and Cinderella and the Tycoon Next Door is my 23rd book for True Love.
And yours is yours is Anastasia's book.
Yes, it is.
We have to talk. Okay, we're going to talk the premise of this book, but I was like, I just knew y'all would save Anastasia's book for last, but I was like, oh no, they didn't. The trickery. I was like, because I'm like, I need Anastasia's book, and I was like, of course we're gonna have to wait for it to be the last one, but it's not.
No.
Michelle, what about you?
So claiming his billion-dollar bride, or in Australia, marrying her outback enemy, is for me book 39, which seems amazing. And I'm in about 2 hours north of Candy in Newcastle, Australia. So we never catch up for coffee, Candy. We should do that.
Ridiculous that we don't.
No. Well, yeah, with Ali's in Brisbane, so the three of us always catch up at conference. We're trying to drag Rachel across to a conference.
I want to come.
That would be amazing.
My dad is my girlfriend in Australia now, so I'm so trying to get in his suitcase.
Oh, I can only imagine the fun pictures I'd get to like on Instagram if you all were in the same place. So, how did the idea for this series come to be? It wasn't an editor like continuity series idea. Was it you all?
I'd had an idea kind of brewing in my mind for a while that it'd be fun to do a series with Australian authors. And so one of my goals for the Romance Writers of Australia conference in 2022, which was in Fremantle in Western Australia, was to bail up Ali and Candy and see if they were interested. So early on in the conference, I saw Ali settling in a nice comfy chair with a glass of fizz in one hand, and I went, now's my opportunity. So I sidled up beside her and went, look, I've got this idea. And she was just so on board. She was just like firing all these ideas. And I'm like, oh, wow, we're going to have so much fun. And after that, it was catching up with Candy at one point and going, hey, you really want to be on board with this, don't you? And she was like,
Yes.
Headlight eyes, but she was like, yes. And
I mean, pull my leg, why don't you?
And so the three of us worked out, well, actually two slightly different premises for stories. And we don't really do outback stories in the Forever line anymore. It was, we'll talk about why later if you want to know. But I'd always really wanted to write a big saga-y sort of outback thing. So we put that on as our second premise, hoping they'd go for it. And they were really proactive. The London office approached the Australian office and said, look, the girls have come up with these ideas. Is there one that particularly appeals to you? And they immediately said, the Outback story, we want the Outback series. And because the books in Australia are brought out as 2-in-1s, they went, we want another story in there. We want a fourth author. And the London office suggested Rachel to us, and we all just went, yes, absolutely.
Yes, please.
I was like, oh my God. Sure.
I mean, come on. Okay, so I need to know, like, why, because what I love about the series, I get 4 books delivered at the beginning of every month, and they're all over the place. So why is, what is it? What is it with the Outback? Like, why don't we see much of that anymore?
Okay, so I can't remember how far back ago this was, But you know how there are so many lines. There are the 5 that are written or edited out of London, and there are however many edited in New York and Canada. Well, there ended up being a bit of a demarcation so that there weren't so many of the same tropes across the lines.
Okay.
So, for example, cowboys, including Australian outback cowboys, went to the American lines like Desire and Special Edition, and royalty came to the UK lines like the Presents and the True Loves. And so, if I know that there have been other authors who have done in both Presents and True Love who have done outback stories, but you'd have to approach your editor and make sure that they would sign off on it, I think. So that's why I wasn't really very I wasn't very confident that they would let us do the outback one. So I was really delighted when they did.
But I think you found like a gray area, and we can have the outback setting and just make them inheritance. Like you found a way to make it work. That's
And
really
we
interesting, though. That's
used
really
so
interesting.
many different elements. So it's not like all 4 books are solidly set in the outback. So we had that glamour of the more exotic locations.
So can we talk the premise? So I feel like, I mean, obviously Allie's book is book 1, and that's where you get the setup for this series. Can one of you explain kind of the setup for it?
Sure. It's Candy here. It's all to do with a will that's got an arcane sounding stipulation that goes back generations in the Waverley family. And it's a stipulation that brothers can inherit straight out, but sisters, and there's only sisters in this generation, will need to marry within a year if they don't want to lose their beloved family home, which is the sprawling and very wealthy cattle station Garrison Downs, and along the way inherit billions along with it. So they have to marry within a year. All the sisters, not just one or two, all of them.
I love that we're laughing so evilly even as we think about it.
I know, because I'm sitting here like, is it a spoiler to talk about one of the sisters? But no, I don't feel like no, you guys put me through the ringer. I was like, what? And then, of course, my heart broke. But then I love the way that everybody handled the situation. I was like, this feels very historical romance, like the setting, the setup of this book.
It's one of the things I love about romance is that you can play with crazy source stuff that would never happen in real life, and just go with it. And it's hilarious that you're saying that it felt very historical because there's the whole family feud thing that goes back generations, and we all started calling dibs on who we would want to write back in 100 years ago. We were like, do you think they'd go for if we wrote a second series in the 1900s? And we're like, no, that's going to be impossible to get past.
We do need like some type of novellas or something. We have to.
Oh, you wicked woman, don't plant that seed.
Selfish reader. It's just selfish. So let's go in order. You all have shared the title of your book. If you want to reshare it, it's fine. And tell us about your particular book. And I love hearing like at least one behind the scenes detail of writing it. So maybe any music you listen to, if you made a Pinterest board, phoned a friend to talk through a scene, like tell us about your book and one behind the scenes detail. Allie?
Okay, yeah. So my book is, as I mentioned earlier, is the first book in the series called Secretly Married to a Prince. And each of the books actually starts with a prologue, which is the same prologue, but written from each heroine's point of view, in which they hear about the stipulation of the will after their father, who is a very, very wealthy sort of billionaire cattleman, passes away. And I love that's how each of the books starts. So we really get to meet each of the characters in each of the books. And we find out there that Matilda Waverley, who is my heroine, who is the youngest of the sisters, when they hear that they have to marry within the year, she has a little bit of a kind of moment where you realize something's going on in her head, because the truth is she's actually married and no one in her family knows about it. So she got married on sort of a bit of a gap year a number of years ago, and then, you know, circumstances conspired that she had to leave, and she's never seen him again. So suddenly when this stipulation in the will comes about that in order to save the family farm, which is the place where she lives, where she loves, but especially her older sister Rose, which is Michelle's story, which is the very final one. The sisters all very much aware that if they don't save the farm for Rose, then that would just be the most heartbreaking thing ever. So Matilda's like, right, I have to head over to this fairy tale land called Chaleur, which is where I met this gorgeous guy many years ago, and we eloped, and then things fell apart. And that's where she has to go and find this guy that she met. She doesn't actually realize he's a prince at the time. And so there's this whole sort of hilariously fun kind of unfurling, realizing that when she finally tracks him down, finds out that he's now the head of this principality in this gorgeous little sort of summer seaside town on the sort of, on the Côte d'Azur. So you go from sort of winter, and I also love that our 4 books are set during 4 seasons as well. So mine's set in winter, and so each of the book gets its own season to go through till we get to the end. And it was fun trying to think of like this, this girl who lives on the family farm, family's this outback cattle station, but that's not her dream. So I had to kind of figure out what she was going to do for a living. So when you talk about those fun facts sort of behind the scenes, trying to figure out what she did that could tie in really with how she met, why she was overseas, and, what kind of life she had. I ended up making her a handwriting expert, and she's someone who has a history degree and works in the provenance and authentication of old love letters. And it was kind of just this little idea that I thought, well, that's something that she could be doing sort of working from home, or, kind of fit in with all kinds of things that needed to work for the story. But going down that deep dive into reading old famous love letters was just the most wonderful thing. So reading love letters by Virginia Woolf and Napoleon and Josephine and Hemingway to Marlene Dietrich, like these amazing letters that I would never have found, which none of this ends up in the book. It just kind of ends up being this kind of sideline research. And to have that kind of, again, when the girls were talking earlier about kind of the deeply emotional, really leaning into romance, having a character whose life's purpose is to authenticate old love letters just feels like an extra bit of sparkle to go on top. So yeah, that's me with book number 1.
Yeah, the thing that I love about this series is, or the line as a whole, is the meet cutes, the meetings, those moments where the paths cross. And in book 1, you just shook my world, because I'm like, she's sitting here having coffee. There's an accident kind of happening. And he's like, that is not who I think it is. And she's over there like, how am I going to track down this guy? Then their eyes meet, and it's like, oh my God. Just, it's classic. I mean,
I love it.
The romance, true love forever. I just feel like those moments where the paths cross every time. I think that's why I love it so much. It's like a lesson in meet cute. It's classic every time.
Thank you. It was fun to write.
Rachel, I love when you do a baby book. Tell us about yours.
My book, Eve, so she is the estranged sister. So yeah, she's not the secret sister, she's the estranged one. So she leaves Australia when she's a teenager, because she discovers that the great Holt Waverley is not the man everyone thinks. So everyone thinks that his marriage is perfect, he has a great wife, he has the great marriage, the great family, but she discovers on her own that her father had an affair. And when she discovers this, rather than shatter all her sister's idealistic view of their father, she leaves and goes to stay with her grandparents back in the UK, her mother's parents, who also don't much like Holt for Holt's father. or taking their daughter away. So they kind of reaffirm her view of Daddy Dearest, and so she becomes this fiercely independent businesswoman, and she's all for living her life in London and enjoying her life there. And she doesn't mean to push her sisters away, but she kind of does. But she loves them dearly. She does keep in touch, but she kind of has her life sorted, so she thinks, until this will gets read, and she knows she owes it to her sisters to come back and try and sort this out. And her way is to basically get out of it, and make sure her sisters don't do anything foolish, i.e., get married. So she is determined to find a way out of the will. So she comes back, and in her whites, of course, to the red dirt of the outback, because she is almost British now.
She's a London girl.
Yeah. And gets down and dirty in the outback, which is quite hilarious to write, actually. I mean, I really enjoyed this aspect to it. And she turns up in this bar on her first night, and she meets a tattooed stranger at the bar. And he's all out also because he wants to forget his family at the moment too, for his own reasons. And he meets this all in white woman, thinking, oh, she's kind of interesting, and they hit it off. They talk about their family without really talking about who they are, and have a wild night together, as you do. And she vacates his presence the next morning, thinking, I'm never going to see you again. You are a stranger. You're very hot. You're very dangerous to my no marry, no fall in love rule, and walks away, only to then find out that he is now the man about to insist that she walk down said aisle. And thinks, oh dear God, right, how are we going to navigate this? Still determined not to ever marry, obviously. And while he's saying, no, you will marry, thinking this is a great old joke, does old Nate. He's having a wild time, thinking this is hilariously funny. And then, of course, she finds out she's pregnant to the same man. So they kind of have to navigate this, because Nate is definitely not going to let any other man bring up his child. And she does need to marry, so he's determined to put a ring on her finger. And they have to, you have to read the book, obviously, to find out how they do navigate it. And it was a true joy to write, but also because it wasn't just about the romance. It was about Eve coming back to her family, to her sisters, and basically seeing her realize that love isn't evil. Her sisters certainly aren't evil. Her father was not evil either. Seeing that magic sort of unfold was fabulous. I may or may not have worn a Kubra occasionally just to get into the scene. So I just wear it every now and then, and you may have seen it on TikTok and on Instagram. And I've cut, I think, 25,000 words to make it fit into a book, because I think it was about 80,000 by the time I finished the first draft. Oh, the joy.
Candy, what about you?
My sister, Anastasia, is a little different from the other sisters who are all born and bred at Garrison Downs. My heroine is the secret sister that the other three didn't know existed until the reading of the will. Suddenly, the secret sister is part of the 4 sisters that have to marry, and they didn't even know she existed. She knew they existed, but she had been her life. She was the love child of their father, and her life had been, up until the time of this reading of this will, had been defined by secrets and lies about the truth of her father. So she's been on the outsider. She's an outsider. And suddenly she's thrust into the heart of this family with these 3 sisters who she expects will resent her and hate her and think she's there making a false claim for inheritance. However, the other 3 sisters are not like that. Their reaction is they're angry that this sister was kept from them. And again, as Rachel was saying, there's this whole relationship with the father, the wonderful Holt Waverley. And Anastasia's relationship was very, very different to her sisters. And so I loved writing that, the wonderful reading of the will, and suddenly there's another person there claiming the estate. But, the sisters become, it's not only in the romance novel of her finding this wonderful hero and her happy ever after, it's also finding family
Yeah.
who embrace her. And I loved writing that. And then her story is A Friends to Lovers. It's a marriage of convenience story where she proposes a deal to get married to her best friend Connor, because she also has to get married within a year. And, one of her thoughts there is, well, why should I do this? I don't want to get married. But by this stage, she's getting so attached to her sisters, she wants to not be the one that lets them down. And so she proposes this marriage to her best friend, Connor. They've been friends since they were kids, strictly friends. He's literally a boy next door. But since she was a teenager, she's had a secret crush on Connor. In fact, when they're teenagers, she suggests that they lose their virginities together. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. He, I see you as a sister.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Anyway,
he sister zoned her.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But he does go along with it because he adores her as a friend, and of course, being in this close proximity of a fake marriage, their feelings kind of in close proximity develop, and they've both got quite angsty backgrounds, including him, which is stopping him wanting to commit or really be in love or admit that he could love his best friend. And on their honeymoon in Budapest, as Ali mentioned before, we don't just stick to the Australian outback in these stories. Their relationship takes a turn for the real, and that was fun too, because again, the seasons. And it was interesting when we were writing this story because we knew it would have both a Northern Hemisphere readership and a Southern Hemisphere. So we had to make sure that our summers and our winters all lined up properly. So my book starts in summer in Australia, but then it goes to winter in Budapest. And my kind of thing I enjoyed doing the research was Anna's mother's family is Hungarian, and that's why they go to Budapest, because Connor feels very strongly she needs to not be overwhelmed by this revelation of the wealth of her father and what had all happened, to also know the roots and the depth of her family who come from Europe. And as Anna's mother's family is Hungarian, they migrated to Australia. I had that really hard task of researching Hungarian cuisine in great detail, and it was absolutely delicious. I'd been to Budapest, so I knew what the food was like there. And, having this very vibrant migrant culture that we have in Australia, I'd certainly eaten a lot of delicious Hungarian food in my lifetime, but I knew I had to make make it authentic and eat some more.
Yeah. For research. For research purposes.
Absolutely.
I love that. I mean, any excuse to eat some good food.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Michelle, now I was like, I just knew Anastasia's book would be fourth, but now I'm happy with her being third, and I'm happy with Rose being last. So tell us about your sister.
I'm relieved now. It's like, oh no, she's
Oh,
she
because
knows
she has so much to, it's all on her. So,
well, I think
it's so important to her, I say.
I think that in part, Rose wasn't marrying before any of her other three sisters because she knew that they knew how much the station meant to her, and she wasn't putting any pressure on any of them. She was already working out ways that she would contest the will, and it would take a lot of money, and it may not work. Blah blah blah. But she wasn't wanting her sisters to make that kind of ultimate sacrifice for her. So that's why she had to be last, really. But trying to think what else. It was really fun to do the feuding families and keep wanting to call Lincoln the boy next door, but when it's over an hour in a chopper to get to his house, and if you're going by the proper roads, it'd be like somewhere between 4 to 6 hours. It's really hard to call that like your next door neighbor, you know. Not like you can just duck across the over the fence and say, "Can I borrow a cup of sugar, please?" Um, but it was a really fun story to write because there has been these generations of resentment and bitterness that have built up between the two families. And Rose she's like, it's nonsense. We're so remote where we live. Neighbors need to pull together. And the fact of the matter is, if the four girls don't marry, the farm will revert back to the garrisons. So Lincoln's father will be handed the deeds of the property, and she sort of feels honor bound to give Lincoln first right of refusal, and which is why she approaches him first. She never expects he'll say yes. She doesn't think, she's pretty enough or glamorous enough for him, but and this is all the stuff she tells herself, but she has got it so bad for him. They shared a kiss however long ago, about 7 years ago, and it rocked her world. But it just was going to cause too much family drama with her parents, his father. So she just never followed through on and, explored where it would take her. And Lincoln has just, every time he runs into her, he flirts with her and bamboozles her. And she's just always wondered what would have happened if she'd said yes and gone on a date with him. And when she rocks up on his station and proposes to him, Lincoln's like, this is my one chance. This is my one chance to turn this woman around and win her over. And I quite love a hero who falls first. So yeah, it was oodles of fun to write, and partly the bringing an end to that feud felt like taking the Waverley and the Garrison stories full circle.
Did you have a behind the scenes you could share?
Which one to choose? It's hilarious. I had a crush on a song, and it's a song that I knew when I was a kid that my sister and I would sing it out at the top of our voices with our dad. And it's called Little Red Riding Hood by Sam, the Sham, and the Pharaohs. Very silly song, but it's about a wolf who wants to reform and win Little Red Riding Hood's heart. And I spent so long trying to come up with a hero who was like a reformed rake kind of wolf. And I couldn't manage to squeeze Lincoln into that mold because he is such a sweetheart. But then it occurred to me, what if Rose thinks he's that wolf? And from there, a lot of the dynamics between the two leads fell into place for me.
So Michelle touched on it a little bit, I think, but like my next question was, what did you all find fun creatively about writing this series? Which, I mean, it's a romance. The romances are all front and center, but when I think about it, it's also like a really fun, at times heartbreaking, but beautiful. The whole idea of it, I think of the sisters when I think of the series now. So what did you all enjoy about that aspect of it? Like writing the relationship amongst the women, the girls.
We're very, very, very naughty because we are romance authors and we do write for Boon, and we're supposed to write stories about the hero and the heroine, right? We have 50,000 words, and our promise to the reader is we're going to write them all about the hero and the heroine. and we broke the rules over and over again. And we wrote a story that was quite heavily about family and sisters, and we just fell in love with them as well. And I think creatively it was absolutely joyous. We all loved it. We loved the ancestry. We loved digging deep into the stories that were so old. I mean, I think Michelle will definitely tell you about the gambling story and the deed that went down, the dastardly, dirty deeds. So basically, we lost days, if not weeks, if not months, going down that rabbit hole. And it was true fun. And that is why we had to cut so many thousands of words to make these stories. We have so much we could release as special little novellas. But it was true fun. It was a joy. It really was. And we did, in the end, we did obviously release a story that was a true romance. It did fulfill the promise. But we also had fun along the way, and we did what we wanted to do. We followed our hearts, and we did our sisters proud. And, we became sisters ourselves. We were calling each other by our sisters' names. I will truly confess that when I was writing the stories, I did have each of the authors in my mind. When I was visualizing the heroine, I was visualizing the author that was writing the story. Honest to God, I would wake up on a morning, because obviously we're in different time zones. So I would wake up on a morning. The first thing I would do is I would get my laptop and I would see what these guys have been talking about during the night. I would catch up, we'd fire the emails, we'd talk, and they'd make me smile, they would laugh, they would cry. I loved all those exchanges of information. It was just joyous. And correct me if I'm wrong, ladies, wasn't it? But yeah, I'm going to let Michelle talk. She's honestly, the digging she did into the past, into Louisa May, whatever she was called, because I think we changed her name a couple of times.
Well, I can't tell you without spoilering the.
That was true. This is true.
So you're going to have to read my book to discover what all this we're talking about is about. But Lincoln's great grandmother had told him that her mother, so his great great grandmother, had kept a diary, and it's his great great grandmother who supposedly lost the farm to Rose's great great grandmother in a poker match. And and there had always been these whispers that dastardly dealings had happened, that there might have been cheating. And so a bit of a treasure hunt happens in my book, wanting, like with Rose and Lincoln, particularly Lincoln, wanting to find this old diary. And it is found, but the story is much different to the public one. And it was much more satisfying, I think. And it was so much fun to come up with that story, so much fun. And I really had to put on thinking caps to how am I going to solve this, and in a way that's, because you don't want it to be, it's a love story. You want it to be, ultimately a uplifting read. And I think we managed to achieve that. But Rachel's talking about how there would be these flurries of emails, and we'd share scenes with each other's sisters and double check, would your sister say it like this, or would she do it something differently? There was this one particular scene in my book, and because I always saw Eve as this warrior for justice, and she's stomping in to say, we don't have to marry, we will fight, and and all of this, and the other three girls are married, and Rose is about to do the deed. And I had, in this particular scene, Eve chasing after her going, you can't do it, are you sure, you don't need to sacrifice yourself, and all this sort of stuff. And she's kind of like really, she won't let it go, and very persistent. And then I read a different scene that Rachel had sent me, and it was a different kind of side to Eve, a softer side. And I went, oh, I want that in that scene. So I completely rewrote the scene, which was fabulous, and it made the scene even more brilliant. And once my editor had read the first draft, or well, it's not the first draft, the draft that I was happy for her to read, she's like, all this sister stuff has to go. you know, this is supposed to be a romance, not a story about sisters. So it was kind of hilarious that I spent all this time rewriting scenes with all the sisters in them, and so much of it had to be cut in the end.
They're just real people in our heads. They were just real characters, real people, and yeah, just loved them.
There was a time when we were communicating with each other a few times, we actually called each other by our heroines' names, not our own. We were so deep into these sister stories, we became them.
Oh my gosh, I love that. This is a book for the girls, okay? It's a
Yeah.
series for the girls. Okay, so like I want to know more about each character. So I have like random ideas of I want to hear what you all have to say. So Allie, for Matilda, what would she be obsessed with watching on TikTok?
Oh, well, I think she would totally be obsessed with the Tortured Poets department.
I knew it. I
Because,
knew you
like,
were going to go Taylor Swift.
100%, not just for the Taylor Swift thing, but the fact that it's the Tortured Poets department.
Yes.
Like, she would love the puzzle side of things, because that is a huge part of what she loves about sort of unearthing these old letters and finding out whether they are actually written by the people that you think they're written by, as well as having this obsession with letter writing and storytelling. And the Tortured Poets department would just be, she would honestly be like having to fan herself and faint hearing the name of that album. So that would be her absolute TikTok obsession, not a doubt.
Rachel, what would your heroine be obsessed with watching on TikTok?
Right, initially I'm like, Eve and TikTok. I haven't got time for TikTok. She'd be like, I am so busy. And then she'd be like, actually, pregnant Eve. And then Mummy Eve would be obsessed with like baby hacks. How do I make this food? Like, feed my baby, how do I make baby food? She'd be all over baby TikToks. All the tips.
Candy, what about Anastasia?
Anastasia's always done everything to please her family because she almost feels guilty about the circumstances of her birth. And she's gone into a career she didn't really like, because what she really wants to do is be a jewelry designer. And of course, the inheritance helps her do this. And her trip to Budapest to meet her great uncle, one of the great jewelers there. So she, on TikTok, would be watching the many, many posts on jewelry trends. And I think her dream would be to have one of her designs go viral on TikTok.
She deserves that. She deserves a viral video.
She absolutely does.
And Michelle, what about our Rose? What is she obsessed with on TikTok?
Well, it's got to be soap operas, doesn't it? It's just like, this is the one frivolous thing about Rose. It's like she's so work focused and she's been too busy for romance. And so in her little bits of leisure time, she is utterly addicted to soaps. So anything soap opera on TikTok, she would be there for it.
Starting with Allie, can you all share what you're working on now and if you have another upcoming release?
Sure. I have my next book coming out is called Always the Bridesmaid, and it is about a woman called Charlotte that's the name of her business. She's a bridesmaid for hire. So she's someone that you can call on if you need a bridesmaid because your bridesmaid has literally just broken their leg and can't be your bridesmaid, or you have a terrible maid of honor who has no idea about organizing hens nights, or you need that kind of bridesmaid who can keep everyone else in line or who's willing to stand up to your mother-in-law. So she started this amazing business where she's like a stand-in bridesmaid. And it's like this fledgling business that she's really passionate about. And she gets offered sort of the biggest wedding of her career. And this could absolutely make her. But it comes with a stipulation that she also has to supply the best man. So enter the boy next door, who was her first love, Beau, who these guys haven't seen each other for many, many years. But she's back living in her parents' house. They're no longer there, and he moves back into the house next door. So they both move back home into the houses next door. And when she gets this opportunity to do this big celebrity wedding, she calls on Beau to be her best man. And the book, it comes out in September, and it's one of these books where the prologue came to me in this vision. And when I started writing the prologue, I just had my mouth open aghast with the stuff that was coming out. I love moments like that surprise you. So if you can find it, I don't know, there may be little examples online of the prologue, maybe not yet, but the prologue I just love so much of this book. So it's like Charlotte, sort of a few years earlier, something happens that sends her scurrying back home. So it's a super, super fun start to a story. So always a bridesmaid. Really excited about that one.
Okay, and that's coming in September.
It is.
Okay. Rachel, what about you?
So I have Unexpected Family for the Rebel Tycoon, which comes out in July, I think, in America. So he's an ex-soccer star. I think you call it soccer, don't you, in America? So football over here, soccer in the States. And so he's just retired because he's too old now to play football at like 32. So old. And he's gone back home and he's living next door to our heroine, she's found herself in charge of her nephew. Sadly, she lost her sister a couple of years ago, so she now has her nephew. And she's a high flyer who doesn't really know how to look after a child. And he's a bit of a cheeky one. And he's up to a bit of mischief. And there's a very cute, I love this meet cute actually. Something happens anyway that brings our lovely footballer round to her house. And that is the little meet cute. And he ends up volunteering as her manny. So he becomes her manny for the summer and looks after her nephew, and it brings them together in forced proximity. And it is super sweet, super sexy, super fun. I absolutely adored writing this book. So hopefully it'll go down well. I really, really enjoyed it. So that one's coming out then. And then I think I've got another one out, I think it's September, a couple of months later, and that's Fake Flim with a Billionaire as well, set in Paris. So that's quite a nice false proximity one. It's a bit of I think I've got like a loosely themed trilogy based on Neighbours, Fall in Love with Your Neighbour.
I was wondering when the Neighbors series was coming out. You told me about the Neighbors. Okay.
Yeah, so they've kind of gone for it's like a loosely themed trilogy. Yeah, so that's the one I was thinking I think I mentioned it to you last time on my podcast. Yeah, so the Fake Fling with a Billionaire, that's the naked meet cute. Yes, at the beginning, which I also probably mentioned to you before. So that's quite risque. That one comes out in September, and that's based in Paris. So that's cool. And then what I'm working on right now doesn't come out until the following February, and that's the final one in the trilogy. And that's got like a furry friends, enemies to lovers vibe, Pride and Prejudice mixed in. And that's based at Bondi Beach, which Michelle Douglas is helping me, Auntie Michelle, at the moment with all my Aussie terminology, because I've got a British hero and I've got an Aussie heroine. I'm just authenticating all my terminology. Got to get it right. So yeah, exciting stuff.
Candy, what about you?
My next book for True Love is a really gorgeous Christmas story, The Tycoon's Christmas Dating Deal, and it's going to be out in October. And the heroine, Marissa, is a Scrooge. She hates Christmas. Dreadful things have happened to her at Christmas, and she's planning an escape to Bali and get away from it all as she likes to at Christmas time. And then to do a favor for her friend, she finds herself agreeing extremely reluctantly she's an event planner, to do the Christmas festivities for this gorgeous medieval stately home, which has been turned into a hotel in beautiful Dorset. And to her shock and horror, when she gets down there, she finds the CEO is her childhood crush, who humiliated her terribly.
Oh, no.
Absolutely hates him. But she can't let on, because she then gets it's quite sweet really, because his old grandmother, it's all very family and angsty as well. Anyway, she has to pretend to be his girlfriend, which is absolutely horrendous for her to be. What a Christmas. She hates Christmas. Has all these beautiful Christmas trees. And she's
supposed to be in Bali.
She has to pretend to like him. Of course, he thinks whoa, he's never remembered her. How gorgeous is she? And so it goes from there. And it's a very romantic setting, and there's a lot of snow and beautiful English gardens and countryside, and I loved writing it. And As before we were saying, what were we doing in 2024? I spent a good deal of the first months here immersed in an English Christmas winter.
Yes, for research purposes.
Absolutely.
And Michelle, what about you?
In I think it's August in the US, I have Tempted by Her Greek Island Bodyguard releasing, and I guess that this is no surprise. It's set on a Greek island, and I channeled so many fantasies when I was writing this story. The heroine, for charity, is taking part in a reality TV show where the contestants are given a rundown um, villa or resort and they have to renovate it. And so she's been getting hate mail, like really ugly, terrible letters. Her father is like, he's like Elvis, is what I think of him. He's like that big. He's like this huge singer that everybody loves, and her mother is a famous actress. So she's grown up with these two hugely high-profile parents, and so she's kind of like a B-list celebrity through no fault of her own. But she is very, very big on doing charity work, and so she's, going to take part in this reality TV show, so she can also show off her interior design skills. And due to the hate mail that she's been getting, her father insists that she hire a bodyguard, that he hires her a bodyguard, and kind of sneaks him under the wire into her team. And sparks fly the moment this pair meet, though they're trying very hard to be professional and all of those things, but they find themselves on this amazing Greek island, and it's warm and balmy evenings and just the two of them. It was a lot of fun to write.
Well, lastly, ladies, where can everyone follow you online? Plug all of your stuff. Allie, can we start with you?
I'm nice and easy. If you go to any social media and pop in at Ali Blake Books, you'll be able to find me. So most of the time I'm on Instagram or Facebook. And also for the writers among you, the How to Write Academy. So we have, at the moment, we have like a How to Write Lots kind of a NaNoWriMo group for people writing every day in May. So we do lots of fun stuff there as well, which helps me get words on the page too, because I love the community, like us writing these books together, having that kind of community writing instead of us all sitting in our little caves alone together. It's a fun place to be. So at Ali Blake Books or How to Write Academy.
Okay. And Rachel?
Yeah, so you can get me on Instagram in the main. So I'm Rachel Stewart 3 on Instagram, and then TikTok and my website, Rachel Stewart Author. And then Pinterest, you can if you want to see visual things, Rage B52, you can see me on Pinterest, and yeah, I think that's me.
And Candy?
I'm everywhere as just Candy Shepherd on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, most recently TikTok and Pinterest. I adore Pinterest. And my website is candyshepherd.com.
And Michelle?
And you'll find me on Facebook and Instagram as Michelle Douglas Author, and my website, which will take you to all the places that I do social media as well, is Michelle at michelle-douglas.com.
Well, thank you, ladies, for sharing your time with me. I know for our Australian authors, it is late. So thank you for spending your evening with us. And Rachel, I hope you have a fabulous afternoon. And thank you all so much for writing this series. I just can't wait to chat with friends about it. The covers are gorgeous. The premise, the setup was fantastic. I can't wait to dive into the rest of the books. I'm just so excited. And I love that you all are excited about it. And I can just feel how much fun you all had together creating it. So thank you so much. Selfish reader here. consider doing more of these. It's so good.
We'd love to.
We
Love to.
we would.